Welcome to the Mining the Delkey Archive podcast, an occasional podcast in which we talk with various Delkey Archive authors, translators, or other fans. Today is a very special episode. We've got a bunch of people here. I'm here today with Edy Poppy, author of Anatomy Monotony and the forthcoming collection Coming Apart, and the as yet untranslated novel Iggy. But you're a lot more than just a writer, more of a performer, have done a lot of things in your life. We'll talk about that in a second. We're also joined by May-Brit Akerhold, who is the translator of both of Edy's books and of Jan Fosse, of a lot of different plays, is living in Australia and one of the premier translators of Norwegian literature. And finally, joining the panel is Walker Rutter-Bowman, who is the editor at Delkey Archive of Edy's books and is also a writer in your own right and a reviewer for the Washington Post, among other places. All good? Good.
All good.
Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to see you guys. I mean, what's interesting is we were talking beforehand is that none of us, well, Walker and I have met in person, but otherwise no one else has met. Everyone's been working separately and appreciating each other and, working with their work and helping promote it, but never seeing each other in person. So Edy, I actually want to start with you and get a little bit of background because your bio everywhere online is super interesting, talking about being a model, being into performance, and then writing your books. I wondered if you wanted to just talk a little bit about your background and what led to your writing of Anatomy Monotony.
Yeah, so I grew up on a farm in the south of Norway, in a village or in Telemark called Bø. And as a little girl growing up there on this farm, I always felt like life is happening somewhere else. I was looking out at the cornfields and I was like, or the wheat that we were having. And then I was like, where is life? So thanks to books, I survived my childhood. Like I realized that in books you can travel. Yeah, in books anything can happen. And I also had a big epiphany when I realized, when I went from fairy tales to more like Marguerite Duras and this kind of autofictional writers, like, oh my God, like life, or at least written life can be like so crazy. You don't need fiction in a way, like still fiction, but so it was like something that really spoke to me. And then as soon as I managed to convince my parents at the age of 17, before that they wouldn't let me go, but at that time I said I have to leave this village, otherwise I think I will be going crazy and do a lot of bad things. And and they kind of understood that I meant it for real, so they're like, okay, time for you to go into the world, even if they felt it was like a little bit early. So then I left to France, to the south of France, and I had never been in France before. I had barely traveled, because we were always looking at the farm and doing things there, and my parents didn't have much money in the 80s. And so this was I just decided to go to France without having ever been there, but through literature, through music, through film, I decided it. And I also decided to take the train because I really wanted to feel the distance between my hometown Bø and Montpellier in the south of France where I was going. And so the travel was physical, really moving to another part of the world, but also a big mental travel. And after a few months, I met my now ex-husband, but then first big love. Mm-hmm. And together we became this sort of crazy in love couple that were it's us against the world. And even if nobody believes in us becoming artists and doing something, we believe in it. So it was a really important meeting for me and my ex-husband, which I write about in Anatomy Monotony, called Cyril or Lou, depending on if it's Vor or myself writing. So it has the first person narrator and the third person. He really believed in me as a writer even before I could barely speak French. He just had the intuition: you have to be a writer or you have to prove me wrong. Right. So it was a really fatal, in the good sense, meeting, and I tried to prove him right. Then it took quite a while, but in the end, first we lived in France for some years, then we moved to London. And it was in London that I accidentally started to work as a model, kind of stories in the 90s, end of the 90s, cool Britannia, London. We were sitting like down in a cafe, a pub rather, like a bar. And then we sat accidentally in front of two photographers. And they were like, can we photograph you guys? And then that kind of started. And because London is really like, at least in the end of the 90s, beginning of 2000, was really like the fashion town for kind of quirky fashion.
Yeah.
Oxton Square, you know, people putting weird things together, and you look for somebody also a bit odd, not just like the classical beauty, but someone who's a bit, you know, mad in a kind of not clinical sense, but just like in life experimenting sense. So I really enjoy that also because I always did weird projects, which and I was really surprised as well of how much it demands of you, you know, like to give your image to someone, like that kind of conversation. It's really exhausting, and it's really like a conversation. What really fascinated me about the modeling thing or about being photographed is that my face or my body or myself, I looked so different depending on who was photographing me. And so I realized they are not photographing me, they are photographing their gaze.
Yeah.
They're photographing how they look at me, you know. And I found that like, a way of understanding what I could be or how many different things I could be, which again then brings me to the writing, because all along that I was living in London and I was also working in art galleries, my motto was like, I'm going to be happily frustrated. I'm going to be frustrated enough, I'm going to be happy enough to like have a good time, you know, enjoy this town and see art and be in art and work my ass off, but I'm going to be frustrated enough to go home and work on my novel, Anatomy, Monotony.
Interesting. That's
so this kind of yeah, so that frustration that I on purpose kept was what made me like manage to finish a book. I was always having a pocket book, like a book that I could put in the back of my pocket. And every time like I had a moment, I would write in it. Like I really was obsessed that I had no time because you have to work so hard to survive in London. So I really used and abused every moment I could to always write. And of course, London is the big inspiration of my first novel. I also worked as a model for artists, which is a big part of that novel. What does it mean to undress, you know, like on a mental level, but also on a physical? And I found it so interesting, like as a life model, you know, this thing that you don't undress in front of the painter. You know, you go behind some curtains, there you undress. And then when you're naked, you can go there and be drawn. So I found that so interesting, all these levels of being naked. What does it mean? That the act of undressing is apparently the more like over the top act, but the being naked. And then also this thing of like the professionality of a drawing studio or a painting studio where the naked body is not allowed to be enjoyed, you know. I found that also very interesting. Like, so the first novel, well, I forgot to say this about France as well, that had an impact on my writing, because when I moved to France, first I just thought I'm going to learn to say in Norwegian what I like in French, what I can say in Norwegian. Yeah. But what shocked me is that I learned to say something completely different, because each language has its own way of thinking. And in France, they think a lot about sexuality. They have a lot of philosophers, and they have a totally different way than I was used to in my little village Bø to talk about sexuality, where it was either very vulgar or very like uptight. But here you had all the nuances, and you had Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre. So I would say that before France, I was not into sexuality, or I was very uptight. Right. But France kind of opened me up as a person, but also language-wise. And so that's the thing, like, because I had a problem with it, or I find it difficult, it became something that I wanted to explore with the language, because I thought Norwegian is not suitable for sexuality to write about it. And therefore, I want to explore it and try to kind of get what I can say in French through into the Norwegian language, because I'm really also obsessed with like every language expands through translated literature. That's why May-Brit Akerhold's job is also so important, because then you get new universes and a language that has to suit it. So anyway, this experience in France with the sexuality and the way to like explore it, what is it, and then my first novel also really finds it interesting, like not just sexuality, but what do you say before, what do you say after? Maybe you never talk again. It can be like the most intense meeting, but it can be the worst. You know, and I find sexuality also interesting because it's like a rebel, you know. It doesn't accept hierarchy, you know, you sleep with the enemy. I mean, it has all these things.
Right.
So it's really like without sexuality, I think the world would be more in boxes. But that kind of energy comes and kind of breaks everything for good and bad. Like it has all those aspects. So so that was the kind of inspiration of my first novel, and those kind of years living in London, even if it just happens during 3 months, more or less, the first novel. The inspiration is like me living there, having lots of different jobs, trying to make it as a writer. And so it's pretty at least emotionally 100% true to self.
Amazing. Amazing. I love that book. I love the book very, very, very much. I've written a long thing about it. And for anyone who's listening who's not familiar, first of all, you should pick it up. But secondly, it is basically what you described, but just as a general framework. Var is married to Lou. She is writing a book that is sort of auto-fictional about the life that they're having. There is also a person that she's in love with named the painter in one case and the lover in the other. I forget which way they go with like the book inside the book.
The American. Yeah.
And then the American who I love, well, in a grown style way of like, what is the name of his, The Secret Life of Plants is the cello thing that he's debuting.
The sexual life of plants.
Yeah. Such a and so there's like a lot of jealousy, there's a lot of issues related to like how to have an open marriage, what that means, what the sexuality means, how that gets reflected within the other relationships, all that. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. To bring you in, May-Brit, I have a question. So first of all, something that you said, Edy, reminded me of this quote from the Guardian article about Fosse winning the Nobel Prize and how you danced to Springsteen when you found out. But in the middle of this article, you say, "I reject the term translator. I create a new version of a piece of literature as if it is written in the new language, but truthful to the original. Her work benefits from her not only being bilingual, but also bicultural." She says, "You must have a full understanding of the original language and the culture it comes from." So I'm curious in relation to what you said, Edy, about the things you can say in French and in Norwegian and how that impacts like the way that you look through the world. May-Brit, do you want to talk a bit about like how you came to be a translator and how that statement and that idea of the different languages and different cultures is reflected in the work that you do?
Well, I was always going to be a dancer because I grew up in a family of gymnasts and dancers, and then I got polio, and that was just then out. Yeah. So then I started becoming an actor in a children's actors thing. So I just loved the theatre. Yeah. From an early age. And then I came to Australia. I had a BA from Oslo, and then I came to Australia and going to do a master's. And the person said, he was head of English. He said, "Why don't you write about your big writer, person?" And I said, "But he's Norwegian." And he said, "Yes, we'd love to know what actually happens in the original." And I said, "Great." And so I wrote a thesis about what happens in Ibsen's original language. And I was absolutely shocked at the terrible translations of Ibsen's plays. And I could not understand why he became so popular, because they were awful. The Michael Mayer Ibsen, the Penguin Ibsen, dreadful. They had not understood his irony. They thought he was realistic. He's not realistic. So I wrote this, and then somebody heard about this woman who had written, she was Norwegian, she'd written this thesis. And so he was at Sydney Theatre Company, which is the biggest in Australia. And he was educated in Germany, where they use dramaturgs, and they don't use dramaturgs in Australia. And so he said, come on, let's have a chat. And I came and had a chat with him and the general manager. And I knew I was not going to leave that office without being asked to translate that play. And that is what happened. I had to kind of work with the director, but anyway, that was my very first experience. And he said, well, you have to be a dramaturg as well. And I couldn't even spell the word. And so I went into the biggest theatre company in Australia, translating Ibsen's Pillars of Society as the production dramaturg, having absolutely no idea what I was doing. And I was good at it. And I learned an awful lot, and I ended up becoming Sydney Theatre Company's resident dramaturg. They'd never had one before.
Wow.
And I was there for about 6-7 years, and I learned an awful lot. And I learned that I was good at it. I understood what a dramaturg was. I understood what happened when an actor said something, and if an actor put another stress on a word, it changed something. And it meant that I could translate even novels, because I realized that it is not translation. You can translate a passport, you can translate a document. You cannot translate literature. You have to understand what the writer is right about, or is writing about in that culture, in that particular language. You have to be, in my opinion, of course, that's not true of everyone. If you are bicultural and bilingual, you can rewrite a piece of fiction from one language to another and make it sound as if it was written in that language initially, but still keep the voice of the original writer. And that is the aim. And I read this of Cicero in the Greek past time. He said the same. I found this piece of him, and it said, I do not translate all these beautiful speeches. I make them as if they were written in the language that I am speaking now for the audience. I am speaking them. And I thought, that's exactly what I want to do. And that is my aim with theatre, or with Jon Fosse's trilogy, which is his favorite novel. There are 3 short stories creating into novel. That's his
That's
favorite.
my favorite of his too.
Yeah, and I translated them. And now he wrote an opera of the middle one.
Interesting.
It opened in, I think it was this weekend in Bergen. He wrote an libretto.
So I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Go on.
No, it's just that is the key, I think, of what you call a translator. I still haven't found another word for it.
Yeah, there is Damien Searles, ironically, has a book, The Philosophy of Translation, which he invents some term, and now I can't remember what it is. But he's like, "But nobody would ever use this, so we're not going to talk about it again." But it was like it goes in a similar
I've
sort
met
of
him. He's very good. I've met him, and I really like him, and he's a good translator.
Yeah, or whatever the word is.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Do the two of you work much on the books together? And I guess as a sort of a add-on to what you were just saying, May-Brit, how do you find it inhabiting Edy's world to then bring over these stories that are very like powerful, very sexual, very like, like raw in a lot of ways? How do you find bringing that over into English or recreating it in English?
Well, I disagree with her when she says that Norwegian is not suitable for sexuality. How can she write these books in Norwegian if she believes that? And how can I translate them or create an English language for them that work? Because I read all the stories now before I was speaking to you, and
Mhm.
I was quite surprised. I actually blushed because for two reasons. First, because of the sexuality, and second, because I actually thought they are very well translated.
They're great. They're really
I
great.
yeah, I like
Comment on that?
the
Can I comment?
language. Yeah, but
Yeah,
they
what I meant. Sorry, can
pardon?
I just comment on the thing with the Norwegian not being suitable for
Yeah.
sexuality? What I meant more is like, of course, I think it is suitable because I have written, right? And
Yes,
I like what
exactly.
I've written and I like
Yes,
what you have translated. But
yeah,
what I mean is that it's not the easiest language to write about it in compared to, for instance, French. And that I liked. I liked the challenge.
Yeah.
yeah,
But the end result, I think, yes, the challenge maybe makes it work even better.
yeah,
And of course, for me, when I got to know that May-Brit was going to be my translator, I didn't dance to Springsteen because I don't listen to him so
yeah,
much, but I danced as well. Like I couldn't have asked for a better translator than May-Brit, and she takes it really seriously. And of course, she makes the first big job, but because we can speak the same language, of course,
yeah,
we also have some conversation, which is like such a like a plus. Like how often do you have that? My books are translated into many languages, and a lot of them I don't even speak. So then you just have to trust. But here,
yeah,
it's
you do.
it's really beautiful that we over the years has also developed a, even if we see each other now for the first time, we
Yes,
have
I
through
know.
uh,
Yeah.
developed a kind of relationship. So, I mean, I hope she will be my translator forever.
Well, I would like to because I like your writing, and or I wouldn't have done it. And to some, Jon Foster just says, "Go ahead. I don't want to read it bec before it's finished, because I just trust you. So go ahead and do it." And his fiction stories, translation, essays, poems are translated to all sorts of languages, and of course he can't read all of them. But his English is fantastic and very, very good. He has now translated Australian novels to Norwegian.
Oh, wow.
That's how good his English is. He has fallen quite in love with the Gerald Murnane, his name is,
Oh,
and
yeah,
has
yeah.
translated to new Norwegian. Yes.
Very.
So, but he has to. He says he has to trust his translators because otherwise he would just fall apart.
Interesting. I'm interested in talking about the kind of through line and the connection between Anatomy and Monotony coming apart, the collection of stories, and then Iggy. But I think it'd be good to bring you in, Walker, and see like what your reaction was to like working on these books and your feeling about the stories and the way that the fiction works on that level.
Yeah, so I mean, I worked, May-Brit and I were in touch first, right? May-Brit, I mean, we,
Yes.
we were sort of corresponding over email a little bit. I mean, I will say that in terms of editing, this was sort of a dream project because it was a very light lift for me. So I would say that the edit was really more of a proof than anything else. But, you know, this book was my introduction to Edy's work. And I guess Edy might, you know, I have a couple questions for you to sort of maybe, you know, as a use as a jumping off point to kind of get into coming apart a little bit more. And feel free to, you know, if these questions don't resonate, just swat them aside. But I was thinking about when you brought up gaze, and I was just thinking about like how much of this book is about sight. And, you know, one of the kind of recurring motifs in the book is eyes. And, you know, I think for me, I'm sort of drawn to the longer stories in this collection, specifically Dungeness and Rain Divide. And I was thinking about Dungeness sort of opens with this moment of sight and sort of a relationship beginning based on sight, right? It's like a woman seeing a man in a way that nobody else has really seen him before. And then that story also ends with blindness is maybe too strong a word, but a disappearance, right? And so I was thinking about like, sort of how you think of sight and sort of these images of or the image connecting to a romantic, sexual, emotional relationship.
Well, how should I answer that? I mean, like I was talking earlier about like when I was being photographed, discovering the different way a gaze can make you appear. It is a passion of mine, this thing when two people meet, they become different. And some people's gaze on you makes you feel really great. Other people's gaze on you make you feel not so great or maybe uncomfortable. And then this gaze can also change during a relationship. Also, as a writer, I think like the gaze, what you see is kind of what I want to write about. Like the gaze and the listening is like my two main tools as a writer. But I would love to say something more about Dungeness because first of all, it's the short story that made me enter into the States to Dalkey Archives, Best European Fiction. So that was like my ticket to America, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really interesting, like how that story started was actually that I went to Dungeness. It's a real place, not so far from London. It's a kind of dream place for photographers because it's so flat that the light falls in a very peculiar light and it makes great photos. So I went there with a photographer on a kind of test. But then I fell in love with Dungeness. And it's the first time I think like that the Dungeness as a space, as a character, was kind of the starting point for that story. But then I also have a good friend, and it was really interesting because he's an interesting guy in London. And then every time there was a party, if I was there and he was there, and people would have met him many times, they would say, "Oh, who are you?" Like nobody could remember him ever. Like
Oh
I couldn't believe it. So I observed that. My gaze observed that. Like and he became the muse, for that guy until someone like actually discovers him. That's why he also tells his name so many times because he's so used to that people are not remembering it. And she, on the other hand, actually has heard it before, but doesn't say it. So that story is also a lot about like what you don't tell. Like all the stories have that as a kind of let's say a kind of rhythm, like what you tell, but also what you don't tell, and how that makes kind of people kind of slightly go apart. I mean, the inspiration for the short story collection was my own divorce. Like I always use like as the inspiration for Anatomy, Monotony was my own open relationship. Here, I was going through the divorce. That's why I also say in the beginning of the collection, I put Ragnhild and Cyril, our names of me and my ex-husband, my birth name, his birth name. And then I put like the when we met and when we left each other as a kind of tombstone or like a gravestone for that couple. So that's the inspiration. And then what I find so interesting about people leaving each other is that you can't leave someone without having met. So in a kind of separation, there is always also a meeting. So there is this dramaturgy, and I found it really interesting, like this thing in between, like because all the stories are touching on this subject of couples meeting, falling in love, and then leaving each other, falling apart in different kind of degrees. Some people are kind of just disappearing almost without noticing. Other people are really tearing all the clothes and all the things of the partner apart and kind of losing it. Others are becoming really violent. So it has a lot of different levels. But and then I was really my focus also because it's like I was the one who wanted to divorce. And through that, I got really interested in male suffering. Like, so this novel is not novel. This short story collection has like male suffering a bit as a focus.
Yeah.
And what happens when a man is left behind. because I find there is many stories about women being betrayed or left behind, and I wanted to have that focus. Also because I felt like so many men around me, including my own man, was being left, and so I felt a lot of empathy for that position, and
I think
and tried to
that's why your work speaks to me so deeply, is the being left part.
yeah, thank you.
I mean, that kind of is a
So
joke, but kind of real.
yeah, I wanted to give that a voice, and I wanted to also try to understand the position of my then soon to become ex-husband better. Of course, not all the stories are about us. I found it also interesting, like you said, Rain Divide, Walker, and Rain Divide and the last short story have the characters from Anatomy and Monotony in them. And because after I finished Anatomy and Monotony, I was like very exhausted of having like a big novel in my head, but I wasn't finished with those characters. And I guess I never will be because they're based on me. But I didn't want to write another novel then. I needed something more compact and more stories. So that's why I kind of sneaked them into, not sneak them in, but I was exploring, can I continue? Can I have a sequel in the form of a short story collection where there only appear in a couple of them? And then they continue in my latest novel, Iggy. Like, I guess my ex-husband is like an eternal use for me. Yeah.
Can I ask, I kept thinking when I read them again, the links. Do you see that there are, now you talked about that you are sneaking these characters in. Do you have any particular sense of links in from one story to another, or are they separate? I found some links, but some of them also, some stories seem to be separate from each other. Do you see links in the story?
You mean with story collection?
Yes, relations between the stories.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like you say, some of them, like, I don't want to make it obvious, and I want to also not make it like that it has to be like that. But if you take like Dungeness, to get back to that story, the woman disappears with a kind of backpack, like a little rucksack, and she disappears, and then you have the story Boils about an old couple that gives each other boils. You later get to hear that she just appears with a rucksack. So it doesn't need to be the same person, but maybe it is. Like, it's up to the reader to kind of look at these little connections or not. If you read the last short story,
that was
which
my
is
favorite, apart from not the last short story where you say don't want to write about Ragnhild, but that's what you do actually.
Yeah, exactly. I can
keep
never
writing about Ragnhild.
Yeah, maybe I should say something about Ragnhild, because because my birth name is Ragnhild Mo, and that's what my parents thought that I was. So I always kind of say that Ragnhild Mo is my parents' dream of me. It's the girl they wanted to put into the world. Once you make a baby, it's also like a fiction you make, or you're hoping for something. And they were hoping for Ragnhild Mo. But when I came out, I didn't feel like Ragnhild Mo, but I didn't know that I could change my name. I thought it's just like skin, like you're stuck with it. And in the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, like Ragnhild was not like a fashionable name. I only knew like old ladies, it felt like I didn't know about Ragnhild Jelsen, for instance, like the queen of Bohemia in Norway. I didn't know about her. So names also comes with a kind of contract of be this. Of course, through being who you are, you can change what a name contains. But anyway, when I went to France, and nobody could pronounce it, and I started to get a lot of nicknames. And I realized that through these nicknames, it was like I could release a different side of my personality. And then I decided to change my name, because I felt like I don't come from an artist family, and I want to own my own art. I want to create a name that is like only me. If it goes well, I take the honor. If it goes bad, I take the blame. And so my name, Edy Poppy, is like a manifesto. I want the Edy name to be a bit like touching into the androgynous, and remind myself that I have to be inside of the feminine and the masculine and the feminine, the transgender, whatever, like to be open for that. And the poppy is, of course, the opium flower, which is like a beautiful flower, but it's also addictive and destructive. So I would like my writing to be addictive and that it looks beautiful. You go in it, like you get like
right.
one on the nose.
Okay. I have to say, I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, that's sort of my name. But the thing with Ragnhild is that Ragnhild is the most loaded name in my life.
I think
Like
it's a beautiful name. I've always liked it. It's a lovely name.
And Iggy is a similar name, but it doesn't have the same impact on me.
Right.
So Ragnhild, when I write Ragnhild, something happens. And
it's
this
an old name.
Yeah, yeah. I like it now as well.
Mythological name. Yeah. It's an
I
like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
and
have to feel comfortable in your name.
Right?
Yeah.
She's my alter ego, so I don't get rid of her. And what I've done is that I've fictionalized myself into Edy Poppy, and I made her into fiction because she's in all my books. And I keep saying I'm not going to write about her, but my latest book is also about her.
Yeah, of course.
So, and about Edy Poppy. So yeah.
It's your other personality.
Yeah, it's just giving a name to different sides of you, because as a kid, I was very shy, very, very shy, and had a big inner world, but couldn't communicate that inner world to the others. And maybe that shyness is called Ragnhild. And a character.
Your own children.
My children have gotten my artist name. Like, so they're all called Poppy.
Oh, are they? Right. Okay.
Oh, so yeah, that's what I want to bring further, like the artist I've become. Let's see what they would do with it. If they rebel against it, they think everybody has an artist name. So they're all the time wondering what their artist name should be.
Right.
Wow. I love that. That's great. That's absolutely great.
I know, Chad, you need one. I need one too.
I would do anything to have a different name. Be amazing. So we mentioned the last short story. So there is a story in Coming Apart called The Last Short Story, and it is essentially a letter to the editor, letter to your editor, to Var's editor, technically, within the context of this book, in which it begins simply enough. I know you're waiting for my last short story, but unfortunately, I have to disappoint you. It's taken me more than 5 years to write this collection, but now that it'll soon be finished, I'm wondering if I should throw the whole piece of crap in the bin and start something new, a novel. And then goes on to say, I feel like I haven't been honest enough in my short stories, not courageous enough either. I've tried to write about the idea of coming apart in all sorts of ways, a kind of encyclopedia of misery, if you like. I've seen myself crying in the mirror, thinking it was genuine, that it was literature, but I've only scratched the surface without really meeting my own eyes or those of the reader for that matter. And I guess, and so one thing that we could talk about, although I'm not sure how much interest it is to the rest of the listening public, but we are going to shift that story to the front because it works as a really cool lens as the first story, looking back towards Anatomy Monotony, sort of framing that, even talks about when I wrote Anatomy Monotony, I was doing blank, and now I'm trying to do this other thing through this collection of stories. So it sort of sets you up to like see kind of what you've been talking about of like the different perspectives, the different way in which these things happen. And I think that's very cool. But then it also, because it is a letter that's basically like, yeah, I didn't go far enough. I got to write a new novel. And you've indicated that Iggy is that novel, essentially, that it goes that step further. So I'm not sure how exactly to ask this, but one of the things that I find very like that I very much like in your prose and in your stories and in the whole thing of it is like how honest everything feels and how like brave you are to write this. Like, the idea of an open relationship is in a different place now with like polyamory being like, featured in Time magazine, basically. But like, there is still like, if not a taboo, like questions around and surrounding that. And to be so honest about like both like the difficulties of it, the challenges that arise out of like one's jealousy, but then also like the joy of that, having that gaze that brings out a certain like sexuality, a certain appearance, or a certain in relationship is really powerful and is really like moving. So I just wonder, like, not sure if there's a question here, but like, how do you feel about that, about sharing and trying to be on the page as like honest as possible about this? It's really admirable. I'm just curious how you've seen yourself evolve through these 3 books now.
Yeah, I mean, I think like digging and trying to be as honest as possible is really scary and challenging. And I always write about something when I have a problem with it.
Uh,
Once the problem is solved, I cannot write about it anymore. So through each book, I move to another place. I have another problem to kind of explore, not solve, but
right.
and what I find interesting, like there was a big discovery when I wrote my debut book is like, what is truth? Because first, and what is being honest? And first I wrote it a bit as a diary, but when I read the diary, I didn't feel that the diary told the story. I felt
Mm.
the diary was a lie, even if all the facts were true. And then I discovered something called emotional truth. Like I have to sometimes fuck the facts.
Yeah.
Maybe I have to make three lovers into one. Like I think literature is also like that. If I have a bit of a corny image here, but if you have like a bouquet of flowers,
Hmm.
it might become one drop of perfume, and I write that one drop. That's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to make that one drop, like the essence. So it also helps me like this kind of, because honesty in itself, who cares? It has to have literal value. Like
Mhm.
it has to be I'm writing literature,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not writing for some kind of, I'm not blogging, or I'm not like writing for some kind of magazine that wants to hear the dirty stories. I'm trying to make literature. So it's a kind of really empowering process to take something dirty, gritty, lame from your own life, where you're really small, or you are really mean, or you are not a big human, and try to like share that as like really precise, and see if you can, who cares about me being like always great?
Right.
People want to see what's going on inside me or my character's mind. And if you are really generous with that and find a language for it, the more precise I am in this emotional truth, which is also always based on experience. I would never write about an open relationship or about people coming apart if I had never had an open relationship or gone through a divorce or a separation. So it also always have to have this thematic truth. But the more kind of close, or the more I write about Bö, for instance, I find I write about many people coming from a village, can be in America, can be in France, and so my personal experience, well, if I'm lucky, it's universal.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of people from all over the world contacting me, where my book has been translated, men or female or whatever gender, and they say, I am Vår, or you write about me. And that
Hmm.
makes me so happy also, that my characters are not necessarily, even if they have a gender, they're not so gendered. Like I often have Pippi Longstockings as a kind of influence,
Yeah.
because Pippi Longstockings, of course, as children's book, but I remember in my childhood, it didn't matter if you were a boy or girl or what gender, you could all be Pippi Longstockings.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what I
Uh,
kind of want now as well. Like if I have a female character or a male character, if I can have a focus, and maybe all doesn't work for all, like I want you to be able to be my characters regardless of your gender. And if I'm very honest, then people feel seen. To come back to the gaze that we
Yeah.
were asked, like
Yeah.
yeah.
100%.
like I think, and for myself as well, like without literature, I would have felt so lonely, because I had moments in my life where I felt invisible. But through literature, I felt seen, because somebody was talking to me
Yeah.
about me in a book. Amazing.
I think I said
So
honesty,
that's
but a word that might be better suited to that, and what you're saying is authenticity. Like the books have a real ring of authenticity to them that goes beyond like what you're saying, just saying blogging a story or telling someone that part, but really resonating with people throughout the world because they are authentic, and the characters and their reactions are very authentic.
Thank you.
They are. I also like Nush the best. I think that is my favorite. And I think it would be lovely to finish on that. So if you start with the last, then you finish with the best, in my opinion. But
Interesting.
that's, of course, it is your choice. But I think it is a very good point that the last short story is the first one in the book.
I think it works. I think it works very well. And I'm
I think it
curious.
does.
I'm curious too, related to that. I'm trying to find, I got my PDF open here. I'm scanning through, looking for lines. But as I do that, what is Iggy about? To tease us that hopefully we'll be able to get you to translate that in the very near future and make that available as well. But as everyone reads Anatomy of Monotony coming apart and then Iggy's coming, what is it about? What is that setup?
Yeah. Well, it's about Ragnhild, isn't it? Is it, Edy?
Well, yeah, well, should I say what, I mean, it's
Yeah.
about many things, but I think like what I found, well, I never get rid of Ragnhild, as we have established. And all the books that I write, I think will continue to write, are kind of talking to each other. So of course you can write, we can read one book and it's a book in its own right. But if you start to read them together, they will tell another story.
Yeah.
And my last book, Iggy, is the first book that I've written that goes over such a big amount of time in presence, because I have a lot of flashbacks in the other ones, but like the first one is three months only, and then different short stories. But here it starts in 1995.
Okay.
So it kind of starts before Anatomy Monotony.
Yeah.
Right.
But then it ends in 2017. So you have like over 20 years that you're following my character. And Iggy I'm kind of mentioning Iggy a little bit for a very awake reader in Rain Divide, because Iggy is an abortion that I took as a very young girl, or not very young, but in my early 20s, and I was married. And so Iggy is the name of kind of someone who's not like a choice in a way. Like maybe I thought I had to take an abortion to be an artist. So I'm also like quoting Abramovich, the performance artist, that said, like if you have children as a woman, you will never make it into art. And then I'm trying to, through the novel, to, now I have children, so I'm hoping to prove her wrong. But it's also like, I wanted to give a language for something that, in a way, it's not so dramatic because I chose it myself and I don't regret it. But at the same time, it stayed with me. And suddenly I was single as a 37-year-old. I'd always been in one or several relationships. And then I was 37 and I was single. And I thought, oh my God, maybe Iggy, that I call the abortion Iggy, maybe he is my only chance at being a mother ever. Like I will only be mother to an abortion. And I started to write Iggy, not in 1995, but in that little gap where I didn't know if I would ever have children, yes or no. I need to start to write something in a question where I don't know the answer. And then later it starts, this middle is also in the novel, but it doesn't start there. And yeah, so it's also like, when I took this abortion, or when my character took this abortion, it's the first time that Edy Poppy is a character. Like I wanted to, because I always write about Ragnhild or Vår. Vår means spring, actually, in Norwegian, and I'm born in spring. That's why I have that name. And now I've used those names so much that I needed to kind of top it. So in the Iggy book, you can see how I become Edy Poppy. I am Ragnhild in the beginning in the farm in Bø. And then through going out in the world, I become Iggy. I become Edy Poppy. So that's also like this kind of travel. And then it's a lot about like my subject, like how can you be an artist? How and the fact of taking this abortion makes the character kind of even wilder. So you have a little moment where she, after the abortion, they decided to have an open relationship. They get married, and then she's pregnant, right? So it fits really bad. And once they take the abortion, the open relationship kind of starts, and we have a little scene in London. And then there is a big jump 10 years forward. So if you want to, you can put Anatomy Monotony in that gap in the novel. and read it if you want to. But what it's also exploring is like then my character meets a really young kind of Italian guy called Antonio, and he kind of wants children and he wants to have a close relationship with her, which doesn't go very well. So what I'm trying to show in my books, and later also with being single, and later also with trying out the craziness of family life, like it has all those different kind of draws of life. You know, being young, crazy, having an open relationship, being in a close relationship, being single, being in a family. And what I'm trying to explore is like, whatever kind of model you go for in life, it's not going to be easy. Like, it's not that the closed relationship is any easier than the open, maybe the other way around. So I'm kind of challenging a little bit what people think. People often think, oh God, an open relationship, that's difficult. But in my experience, a close relationship, oh my God, that's difficult, because then when I am in a close relationship, it triggers my jealousy. And I hate that, because jealousy makes the world small, and I become suspicious because signs of the other person's behavior that would be totally okay in an open relationship is then a question of maybe he's hiding something or she's hiding something.
Yeah.
And so I'm exploring being betrayed, but also betraying. A lot of things are going on in Iggy. So I really hope that May-Brit will translate it and you will take it further, and that we can kind of continue a long collaboration, because I will not stop.
Completely agree.
I hope not.
I love that. And I think that one of the things I didn't say explicitly in this, but that does resonate with the stories too, is the idea of communication. That within these relationships, open, close, whatever, the communication is the thing that makes it function. And that communication can be difficult at times for either jealousy reasons or for being too honest reasons too. Like any sort of thing can go wrong. But I am going to have to. Oh, sorry. You answer that, and then I am up against a hard deadline, so I don't miss my class. but what were you going to say?
Okay, so the last thing that I want to say is like, yeah, so whichever, I think the thing in life is to choose which price you want to pay, like whichever kind of view on life or kind of relationship you want to explore, you know, you have to pay a price, but you also get a lot of joy. And it's just a question of what price are you interested in. And in my experience, that also varies in my life. I'm not the same my whole life, and I want to try different things. For me, it was really important to try to be single. And there is this sentence in Rain Divide where the character says, you know, I wonder who I am without him. Am I more myself, or am I just more lonely? You know, who knows? It's an exploration of I find it's also my duty as a writer to expose myself for life, which is also the joy, because I think that's where I find my language in experience.
Very cool. Well, thank you both for doing this. I want to leave with one last. This is a line that I came across again this morning while I was looking up some stuff. That is still one of my favorite lines that the two of you ever wrote. Is nostalgia doesn't mean anything other than what used to be is over, and now you wish it could be again. Which I think is really just a beautiful and powerful line. So thank you for bringing that into the world, both of you. And thank you for being here. Everyone who's listening, you can get Anatomy Monotony from bookshop.org or the Dalkey Archive website. Coming Apart will be available this fall. You can pre-order it, of course, through both of those locations as well. Otherwise, we'll be back shortly with another conversation. And you can always follow us on Apple Podcasts, rate and review. It's on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch us on YouTube. Do all that stuff that you always hear people doing podcasts tell you to do. You know what's up. So thanks, Edy.